Hi, welcome to Fine Wine Agency TV. I'm Eric Thorner, here today with Thomas Pastuszak, Wine Director of Colicchio Sons. Today we're going to be chatting about something near and dear to my heart, near and dear to Thomas's heart, New York State wines. Thomas, you have arguably one of the best selections of New York State wines of a New York City restaurant. What made you decide to feature these producers in this sort of selection on your list when you have so many countless other regions to choose from, which you do cover really well? Why New York State?
Certainly. Well, I think a wine program should certainly show diversity, it should show breadth, it should show depth. As far as selections go, for me the most important thing is the grower, the producer, how they treat the land, how they make their wine. In the case of what we do here at Colicchio Sons for the wine program, I have great small producers from around the world, whether from Italy, from France, but because Chef Colicchio's food focus is definitely partially on local cuisine and using good local ingredients, certainly wanted to incorporate a local component of the wine program as well. So with regard to wine specifically, Finger Lakes wine region is an area that I lived in for the last few years before moving back to New York City. And I've also been partial to some wines from the Long Island area. Decided to bring on what I felt were the most boutique, the best producers that featured the varietals and the styles that show the most potential for these still growing regions, but specifically with a focus on the Finger Lakes, because as far as I'm concerned, I think it is the region in New York State that has the greatest potential for making fine wine, as far as New York State is concerned.
Absolutely. What are some of the trends that you've seen with New York State producers in general in the last couple of years?
New York State has had a very interesting history with grape growing. Going from basically making growing vineyards that mass-produce grapes for purposes of making juice, and likewise ceremonial wine. It's only recently that the vinifera varietals, that's to say Riesling, Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, other varietals that you find more in the European wine regions, are being focused on by New York State producers. So fortunately what we're seeing is these smaller producers, these more boutique producers, with some influence from international forces, are choosing the best sites, they're finding the best terroir, they're getting the best clones, they're using the best vineyard practices to harvest the greatest potential in the form of the greatest grapes from those vineyard sites. So it's, I think, a directional shift towards making finer wine, using finer ingredients, by tending to the land in a more responsible and thoughtful manner.
Hypothetically, if I was a wine director or a retail store manager and I had toyed around with the idea of putting together a New York State wine program, what sort of advice would you give to someone who's in your shoes?
I mean, I certainly think most people in this day and age, with food and wine becoming a more important component of life in the U.S., more people are focusing on quality rather than quantity. And I think that, let's say you're a boutique wine store owner and you have 300 selections, if you're going to allocate 10 spots on your shelf for fine wines, say from the New York State area, choose them from the best producers that feature the varietal or represent that area the most accurately. Where you can find some, very good, for instance, Cabernet Sauvignon coming from the North Fork of Long Island or from the Finger Lakes, I think it's better to find the specific producer who's making the most exceptional example of dry Riesling, for instance, from the area. If you want to feature a Riesling that shows some residual sugar, find the producer that you feel represents that style best, as opposed to casting just a huge net and bringing on a lot of different wines.
Okay, keep it focused, and also not to take the romance out of wine, something that's really just deeply part of our hearts, but can it be profitable? That's always something that we in the wine business have to think about. Is there a way to just really tailor it to make it fit your program better and make it more profitable?
Well, I think that it's a sort of a big question, but there are many different price points for the wines that we're finding, in the areas like Finger Lakes, for instance. Likewise, on a wine list, for myself, we want to make sure that we sort of cast a broad net and we can represent different price points. As far as profitability is concerned, I think one of the things that is working against the New York State wine market right now is that there's a history of not so great wine. So as a result, what I personally try to do is make sure that the markups, the prices that we're asking for the wines that we're representing are perhaps a little bit more accessible, a little bit more friendly to the guests or the customer's wallet, because that will, in effect, get them a chance to try a wine that might cost a little bit more somewhere else, but because you're giving them a little bit more of a value at that particular time, there's more incentive to try it, and then that might lead to, for instance, them purchasing more on their own, or representing or going out and visiting those wineries on their own.
Certainly, I guess that's really the key to any small producer. Just make sure that you get the customers to try it, and if it's the right wine, it's going to work regardless.
Certainly.
So, not to put you on the spot, but what's one of your favorite New York State wine pairings? Any particular dish that you do here that you particularly like to pair with?
Certainly. Well, I would say one of my favorite wines right now in the New York State area is certainly Riesling. That's my favorite varietal in the area. Bloomer Creek Vineyard is a small estate up in the Finger Lakes, actually on Seneca Lake, between Seneca and Cayuga Lake, that makes fantastic Riesling in several different styles. I find that their style of Riesling, especially their Autumn Vineyard First Harvest, is this amazing combination of intense, powerful acid, but at the same time nice residual sugar, sort of nice balanced sweetness to it. That's a great play for looking for something with a little bit of a fat or a little bit of a gamey sort of texture. At Colicchio Sons right now, we have fantastic charcuterie that we're making in-house. In particular, a country pate, which is has very fine texture, has a really strong component of fat in it, but also comes alongside with a little bit of a hibiscus gelée, a little hibiscus reduction. The fat and sort of the intensity, the flavor of the pork coming through in the charcuterie, balanced by that intense razor-like acid and the sweetness to sort of counter the fat of the pate, I think, is a fantastic sort of balance. So I would say right now, thinking seasonally where we're at right now, that would be one of my favorite pairings.
You're making me damn hungry and thirsty right now.
It's good.
All right. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to chat about
Of course.
New York State wines. So always, folks, drink good wine, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.